Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Mondays with Maishi. Thanks for coming, and I appreciate your patience after last week's little hiatus. I actually took a vacation for the first time in like 20 years or something, so it was really nice to be away, but I did miss my audience and friends at Mondays with Maishi. And I'm really glad to be back with a superstar presenter and professional and contributor to the field of psychotherapy, and that is Debra Wesselmann, out in Omaha, Nebraska, which I think is somewhere in the United States, if I'm not mistaken. Is it?
It is right in the center.
Right in the center.
Dead center.
So we East Coasters, don't know much about the center of the United States, but it's there apparently, and I know it's there because I believe a year or two ago we had Professor John Kane, who is also in Omaha, Nebraska. So if there's two people there, it must really exist. So, but Deb, thank you really very much for agreeing to come on and participate and contribute to this wonderful forum where we have mental health professionals from around the world learning and growing and developing, more competence and more clinical professionalism from, because of people like you who are willing to come on and discuss various aspects of psychotherapy. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Tonight's topic is the process of treating attachment trauma. Deb has written a number of books. Is it 3 or 4 books discussing attachment trauma and the various treatments with EMDR and other modalities. So Deb, can you first just tell us a little bit about who you are, how you entered the field and sort of became interested or experted on attachment trauma?
Sure. So I've been in the field for over 30 years now, but in my first life, I actually was a teacher, an elementary school teacher, and I taught in an area that was very low socioeconomic area where there were a tremendous number of issues. I had, in 4 years of teaching elementary school, I had 4 parents commit suicide. There was a tremendous amount of drug addiction and just a lot of poverty. And I saw these kids struggling so much with their mental health. And I think that's when I first thought, I really want to be working with this mental health aspect of things. And then I became a mother, and my middle child came to me through adoption with a history of her own prior to coming to us. And I knew nothing really about trauma or attachment, but I realized, oh my gosh, there's stuff here that I don't understand. And
can I ask what age the child was?
She was 2.5 when she came to us from Korea, and she had been in foster care in Korea for a short time, 2 foster homes, and then came to us. And yeah, I was just really not prepared. I think I didn't understand so much of what I was seeing, and so that was another reason that I thought I really want to understand more about these kids and trauma and what happens and why I'm having trouble, because I just thought, you just give love to a child and then they'd be fine.
Right.
And so I went back to graduate school in counseling and always had this idea in mind of working with trauma and kids but I must say, even in graduate school, I really didn't get the understanding that I wanted. There were no classes on trauma in my graduate program. I graduated in 80. Wait a minute. I can't remember exactly, 88, I think, from graduate school, 88 or 89. Now I'm a little foggy. But after graduate school, I started seeking more workshops, more trainings, reading more. I delved into the attachment literature.
Mhm.
I started reading Bowlby and Mary Main and Mary Ainsworth and then Peter Fonagy and Alan Bateman, and it started to become more clear. I started to have a better understanding, and then began understanding more about like, parts of self. That gave me a broader understanding. And then in 94, I was EMDR trained. My level 1 was with Francine Shapiro. Yeah, I was lucky enough, she was still training. And then my level 2 was with Gerald Puck, and he was a fabulous trainer. And that opened up a whole new world.
Mhm.
I'd also gotten into the hypnotherapy realm. I had gotten certified in hypnotherapy through ASH, American Society of Clinical Hypnosis. But things started to fall together. I started to really feel for the first time like I had some tools, and I began working with adults as well as children.
Mhm.
And I've just had a passion for it ever since. It's just been a real
Fascinating.
fascination for me. And I must tell you the follow-up, my daughter, who came to us through adoption, is 40 years old and doing really well, and
Wow.
happy mother herself, a
Wow.
mother
That's
too.
wonderful.
So yeah, so that's a good thing too. Yeah, it's been a really wonderful career, and I've met so many people along the way. There are now so many people out there exploring this area and learning more and growing, and I'm always learning.
Mhm. Attachment is something about attachment theory, and the concept of attachment that just seems so rational. It makes so much sense. You could almost, I mean, the way I experience this is you can almost feel it. You could feel the attachment energy in the room
Yes.
between people, with clients. And what's even more fascinating about it is that you can also feel the change. It's something that it's very difficult to put words to, but you can sense the change in a client based on their attachment style, loosening up, strengthening, tightening. You can almost feel the energy.
It's true. It's true. You really can. And I think that after, gaining more of an understanding about attachment, I find that I am so much more about the process of therapy. You talked about, the process of therapy, and that's your interest.
Yes.
And I find that no matter what tools I'm using, it's so much about how I show up and who I am in the session. I find that it being genuine and bringing myself into the session and who I really am means so much more than whatever tools I'm using.
Yep, absolutely. Well, you said the right thing when you talk about process, and I'd love to ask you a few questions about process, especially working with children, where it's sometimes more challenging because of the lack of verbal skills or articulation, or even just self-awareness that some children don't bring to the table. And so I'd love to ask some questions about that. Before I ask the questions and start, I just want to make a couple of announcements. First of all, we really, really love when people can turn on their videos, and especially if you have a question, to please turn on your video, raise your hand using the reactions tab on the bottom right of the screen. Click the raise your hand button and we will call on you. Deb, I don't think is very intimidated from questions. No, welcoming questions.
I love questions.
Love questions. The
I'd
only,
love to see people because we're about attachment here.
that's right. This is attachment itself. So let's all show our handsome and pretty faces, and whoever can turn on your video, please. We love to see you. I also want to thank Aaron Herzog for reaching out to Deb and finding her for us. Thank you, Aaron. He's right there.
Thank you, Aaron.
And of course, I want to announce once again, as I do every week, that the show is now sponsored by OKclarity.com, which is a website, a platform for those of you who would like to have your own website. You can go to OKclarity.com and they take care of everything for you from soup to nuts. They'll put you up and you can put up whatever media you'd like. You could put videos, you can put articles and blogs that you have, and put anything up there that you want, and they advertise and market for you. OKclarity.com, it's a great place. And what they did tell me this week is that for clinicians who are accepting insurance, they are now signing up clinicians with 6 months free on their website. So if in order to encourage that clinicians accept insurance, they are offering a 6-month free bonus to add yourself to their website. So I encourage all you to take a look at OKclarity.com and consider signing up with them. Okay. So you said so many things, and I already jotted down so many notes. I'm really excited to talk about this. I just want to ask a question. I don't know how many people over here don't know about what attachment means. Maybe you can share a little bit about what the different 4 styles of attachment are.
Sure.
But I would love to hear from you, Deb. What you mentioned so many names, experts on attachment that you read, starting from Bowlby. And I wonder if there's something that you could tell us about attachment that perhaps some of us don't know, something that you've learned or picked up over the years that's either nuanced or just not known.
Something that maybe a lot of people don't know is that you just talked about kids and how they can't articulate well. Some people aren't aware that secure attachment is associated, and this is an area, if you study Peter Fonagy and Alan Bateman, and they're in the UK, Anna Freud Institute. What their research shows is that secure attachment is associated with a good high capacity for mentalization and the ability to articulate what's happening inside of me, my own feelings, my own thoughts, my insights, my motivations, and the ability then to also guess, hypothesize what is going on inside of others, so that I can read others' faces and body language and make accurate guesses about their thoughts and feelings and motivations and so on. And kids who have had poor attachment experiences with adults who themselves had poor attachment experiences, those parents are not able to attune to read their own children, to mirror back to their children what the children are feeling or struggling with. They're not able to respond with sensitivity to reassure or soothe. Those children grow up without the ability to read themselves, to understand themselves, to tune in to what is going on inside of themselves. And they therefore also have a poor capacity to understand and read the feelings and thoughts of others. That's why a lot of kids with really poor attachment experiences, like kids who come out of lots of placements or orphanage care, often even have a lot of autistic features, even though they actually are not on the spectrum, but they have such poor capacity to mentalize that they actually appear even slightly autistic. They can't They can't read and
Those are the ones that
understand.
we would diagnose with reactive attachment disorder. And I'm
Yes,
assuming they have those features because, whereas the autistic child may not have the neurology, the reactive attachment child just never had the development of the parts that they actually have.
right. That is right. And so those parts of their brain, I assume, are even underdeveloped. Well, and they are. I mean, there's also research out there. I don't know how to pronounce his name, Teicher, and his colleagues who have found that those early, poor attachment experiences and early neglect or trauma actually does interfere with the development of, like, for instance, that prefrontal brain. And that part of the brain that is able to mentalize and think about what others are feeling and thinking and what I'm feeling and thinking. So it affects the brain. It affects, just the development of those processes. And then you have children that maybe are diagnosed on the spectrum, and definitely children with reactive attachment disorder. And it's not what people used to think. People, honestly, back in the 90s, when I was first studying all this, thought reactive attachment disorder really was, it was like diagnosing a child as a sociopath. I mean, that there was so little understanding back then about trauma and the development of the brain and nervous system that people really misunderstood those kiddos and did not have adequate or appropriate therapies for them.
One of the things that I love to watch, I'm a father of many children. And one of the things that I enjoy so much about fathering, parenting the little guys, the little infants to toddlers, is that you can actually watch in their development. I'm sure you're familiar with Dan Hughes, who's an
Yes.
attachment expert. So we had him on the show. And one of the things that he talks about a lot is playfulness. And you can watch as you're playful with your child. At first, they just don't get it. They don't understand the peekaboo. They don't understand what's going on. And they're sort of like working to get what's going on here. And at some point, they just get it. It's like, he's playing with me. This is a game. And then they're like, and you kind of watch the development of the attachment and the development of the personality evolve. And I sometimes look at, parents like those who you described, who have very little personality, because of their own attachment trauma or attachment arrest, developmental arrest in their attachment. And they can't do that. They don't have the capacity to be playful. And it's more just like very businesslike and move him from here to here, very mechanical and methodical. And I watch those children and I wonder if they were raised with parents or by parents who had more personality, who were more developed in this area, would they be different people?
Yes, absolutely. I feel like their authentic personalities would be able to come forward, but those authentic personalities or the potential of who they can be gets repressed. And because they're living so much just out of that fight, flight, self-protective mode, there's no room for play. And the polyvagal theory tells us that if you're living in, sympathetic nervous system activation or that dorsal vagal shutdown, then there's no room for that social engagement and play and just, that personality coming forward.
And you're talking about more severe circumstances where people are living in their sympathetic system, and I'm even describing just more innocuous, like low personality, low character.
Yeah, you're right. Just even, which I guess in attachment terms you might see that as in kids, they call it the avoidant attachment, and in adults, they call it dismissive attachment, where there is just this sort of, all of that is kind of shut down. There's a little bit of a detachment, and you do see more of that just perfunctory parenting, go here, do that, and you don't see that fun engagement.
Right.
And then it's reflected in the kids and the way they're interacting. Absolutely.
So I guess, one question that I have on that is, as therapists, okay, do these children, let's assume we're talking about children for now, and then we can maybe move that into adulthood, but is there hope for these children who in their very formative years, in the first 3 years of development, hadn't received this kind of interaction, this kind of attachment? Can a therapist make a serious, significant difference in their lives by providing that? So if I get down on the floor and get really playful and really warm and really genuine and open, how much can I affect a child whose brain development was arrested in those early years of development?
My opinion is you can have a significant impact. Therapists have a significant impact on these children. If they have foster or adoptive parents, there's a potential for those parents to have significant impact. I do not believe you can completely make up for what was missed. There will always be that shadow of that earlier existence, but the impact is really significant. And the more we, I think, throw ourselves into it and who we are, and we bring that to the table and truly connect, and we're truly present, the more impact we can have.
Okay, and what about a child who had the attachment during his or her earlier years, and then had an attachment trauma occur? So the loss of a parent, transferred to foster care, but at 5 years old, at 6 years old. Is there a difference in the prognosis of a child like that when he or she enters therapy and goes through the process? Do they have a better chance of re-accessing what once was?
Yes, I think the answer is yes. If there was some good stuff early on, this is what I've seen in my experience anyway. If there was some good stuff early on, even if things fall apart later, I think it's easier to bring that back.
Re-access, because it is already in existence.
Yes. And I think probably brain development has a lot to do with that. If that part of the brain has developed appropriately early on, then you are able to get that back through the connection.
Okay, great.
Sorry about my dog. Somebody just came in upstairs.
That's great. Well, we're happy to have him join. Oh, there he is. Okay. Is that Norman or is that the other one?
That one is that's the other one.
Okay.
He's the my little challenging one, and I might just open my door and just let him go on out.
Just want to remind everybody, please, for those of you with questions, don't be shy. Raise your hand using the reactions tab on the bottom right of the screen, and we're more than happy to take your question. Please. This was once a culture where people raised their hands all sessions. So let's reinvent. Or
I would love to hear other people's thoughts about working with these kiddos or adults, grown-up kiddos who have been through those experiences.
So Deb, let's talk a little bit about attachment trauma versus just not perfect parenting. When how do we distinguish between, we all think that we have attachment trauma, right? None of our parents were perfect, besides mine, of course, maybe yours, but how do we distinguish between imperfect parents and attachment trauma? Do we all have some attachment trauma on some level?
That's probably true. In the research, what you find out is that attachment security is really on a continuum. I guess I discovered that when I was trained in the adult attachment interview, which is this, oh my gosh, it's a 2-week boot camp that you go to, and it's a hour-long structured interview, and it takes about 3 hours to score it. So if you do the full thing. But what you discover is that in the scoring, people can get anywhere from a 1 to a 9 in these different categories. And there are very few people who have a completely like a 9 secure attachment with no secondary classifications.
Mhm.
I think most of us have some underlying tendencies one way or the other. So it is on a continuum, and that's what makes us human, and that's what makes us interesting. And I think that's okay. We all have our little areas of insecurities. So yeah, indeed. And what we call little T traumas, the moments of misattunement, the times when maybe we felt a little bit ignored, or we had parents who were a little bit critical. I think that's all sort of part of the human condition.
Mhm.
But when we have a situation where the child feels that there is no unconditional love, that it has to be earned, and I'm never quite good enough, and I never get there, or the child who indeed is physically abused, or there's complete neglect, that takes us to another level. And then we have not one of these, anxious styles of attachment, but we can have a disorganized attachment, which is much more of a trauma response. Or we can be really unattached. There's the child who had so much neglect or was moved so many times that the child never developed an attachment to anyone. And that has some real serious ramifications.
Okay, so let me just recap and make sure I understand. The attachment trauma is really referring to a child who was either severely neglected, highly and constantly criticized, so that they developed this negative self-image, negative sense of self, never praised or lauded, or very highly preoccupied parents, so that would go into the neglected, or thrown from place to place, from environment to environment because of whatever loss or whatever reason. And those children never really had the opportunity to be in a sort of eye-gazing, loving, made to feel special, important, valued, valuable. Those are that's the clientele that we're describing.
Correct. That was a really good summary.
Thank you. And then how do these children present in the therapy room? So suppose you get a child who's just either misbehaving or not behaving or not performing. How can we start to identify, besides the family history, how can we identify in their attachment style that there's something amiss?
Yeah. One of the signs that you'll see is the child who comes into the room and they don't engage. They're everywhere. They want to be everywhere in the room except engaged with you. Would be, and there are different, you see different presentations, like that would be one. That would be the child that maybe has that disorganization, but they're more toward the dismissive. I'm just not interested in you, because to be interested in you is to be vulnerable. There's underneath that, there's a fear of rejection. I'm not going to be good enough for this person. And then there's the child who comes in the room and they are on you, or you go into the waiting room and they're wanting to crawl up on the laps of strangers, and they want constant attention, and they're constantly seeking more and more and more. That is the child that has more of that tendency toward the ambivalent resistance. Maybe they had more of the preoccupied parent, but there's such serious damage that they cannot relax. They are constantly seeking to get those unmet needs met, and maybe having meltdowns and tantrums because they cannot tolerate not being attended to. It's too scary.
And so what does a securely attached client look like?
So the securely attached client is that now they can still have maybe ADHD, or they can have depression, or they can have anxiety, but they come in and they're able to utilize the therapy. They're able to engage. They're able to articulate. They have that mentalization. They can tell you what's going on inside, and they're able to listen to what you have to say and take it in. So the difference with kids that have attachment problems that are pretty serious is that first, they have difficulty utilizing therapy at all. They're the kids who, if we don't know about attachment, we might say, this kid isn't motivated. They're resistant. They're just not workable.
Mm-hmm.
But if we know about attachment, we understand what's going on. We know deep down that kid wants this. They want to connect. They just have no idea how.
So the securely attached child is the one who's going to be able to engage and have a give and take, pay attention to your verbals and nonverbals, take that in and share his or hers with you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. They're the ones that the therapist will say, oh, they're just a pleasure to work with, and
joyful.
yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take a couple of questions before we continue. Aaron, please go ahead.
Hi, Deborah. Hi.
Hi, Aaron.
I'm in the process of reading your book.
Oh,
It's great. It's extremely helpful. It's eye-opening. By the way, I've used your message of love that you developed. I'm using it with clients to help them attach with their parents. I see amazing results.
Yes.
I emailed to Moishi a copy of it, so if Moishi wants to share it. Okay, so here's my question. I have two questions, actually, if Moishi allows me. And number one is, how do we know if the child is autistic or if the child is suffering from developmental attachment?
Yeah, that is a good question. And honestly, I would say to you that you would need to know that there were other signs of autism besides that sort of avoidance or lack of engagement or inability to articulate. I usually just send the kids that look like they could be on the spectrum. I usually just send them for some testing in order to find out exactly, what's going on here. Did you ask a question? I didn't quite hear.
Yes, my question is, how do we help this child to mentalize?
Yeah, so we do it sometimes in some playful ways. One, for example, is the dominoes, we call it, where I'll set up dominoes and show them how, one domino knocks over the next, and dominoes, aren't they fun? And if you pull out a domino, the dominoes stop falling down. And then I say, we're going to talk about the dominoes that happen in the house. And I pull out Post-it notes. And we start putting Post-it notes up on the wall. And we'll take an example of some interaction that happened at home. between the parent and the child. And we start putting up on the wall Post-it notes about, what were the thoughts, what were the feelings of both the parent and the child, and what was the action, and then what was the thought, and what was the feeling. And we start really, it's like a little behavioral chain analysis, if you know DBT, but we do it with kids in this playful way to start delving into, what do you suppose was happening inside? What do you suppose mom was thinking? What do you suppose dad was thinking there? What were the feelings? Without any judgments, with just an attitude of curiosity, to just start learning more about these interactions at home and what's going on? What's mom feeling and what's dad
So
feeling?
you're looking essentially to cultivate something that most children would already have, and you're going back and saying, okay, what I'm realizing about this child is that he doesn't have this basic knowledge and understanding and awareness, and so let's help to develop it. And what happens when the parent themselves, you're having the parent join their room, but there's an assumption that with many of these parents, they themselves are lacking that attachment and that awareness or mentalization. So does that detract, or does that in somehow limit this process?
And I usually assume that the parents are going to be lacking some measure of mentalization, and some really lack it. So they're learning too, along with the child. And my role is to just be really present, really, curious, again, non-judgmental. We're just going to understand this. We're going to work together. We're all going to be a team. And we're going to do this as kind of like a little game. And we're going to, put all the dominoes up on the wall, and we're going to figure this out. And that way, then we can start talking about, gee, I wonder what might have helped things go better. Where might we have been able to pull a domino out? What could have happened instead? Mom, what could you have said instead? What might you have done that would have worked better to help your child through this moment? And we can ask the child, what might you have been able to do in order to sort of help this situation turn out better? And we just all work together like a team and explore and think about it. And just, I'm really cultivating an attitude in the room of curiosity and just learning about one another.
And are you facilitating any kind of dialogue or conversation or attachment between the mother and the child?
Yeah, absolutely.
How is that happening?
Yeah. Well, and one of the things I like to do also for that, to that end, is usually we do this with couples. It's the communication activity where you take turns expressing the feeling about what's going on, and then you ask the other person to say what they heard. I heard you say, that you were really upset with me because I didn't pay attention to you. And so we'll start that kind of interaction. Like, can you tell your mom what you were feeling in this, when this domino happened? Can you talk to your mom about what was going on inside of you? Like, what was the feeling, or what was your body doing? What was happening inside of your body? What did you want to do? And then the child is talking maybe about, I wanted to run away, or I felt really nervous, or I got really mad and I felt like a volcano. And then oftentimes I'll ask the parent, like, what are you understanding? Let's just check to see if we have it right. Or I might say, here's what I'm understanding.
So you're creating an attunement between parent and child.
Right.
Something that they really should have had cultivated naturally from childbirth, from
Exactly. So it's all about helping. Mostly we want the parents to attune to the child. It's not really about the child learning to attune to the parents, but it also is. I mean, as the parents learn to attune to the child and they're responding with sensitivity over time, even that child is going to develop the capacity to understand better what's going on inside the parent. Not that that's the child's job, but overall,
that's
that
what's going to
children
happen.
do, that is what happens. Children do start learning to understand other people. Like that's the ultimate goal.
Excellent.
But first it has to start with the parents. Mhm.
Excellent. Okay, let's take a question from Ruchama. Go ahead, Ruchama.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much. This is so enlightening. Basically, my question is adults. Are we okay shifting?
Yeah, sure, I am. Mhm.
Awesome. I have numerous adults and my lens of attachment is on all day. So I have numerous clients who are starting, the alliance is really building nicely with myself. And they're starting to become aware of a deep, acute loneliness. And they kind of know, they don't understand attachment, but they know something's wrong with me, even if they're not expressing it. And it's a definite, that attachment of, I want to connect, but I really can't. I want to, but I'm only scared. How can we help them? Because at this point, they're aware of that pain and it's so acute. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. And I think I can tell from just talking with you that just talking about them, you are attuning to what is happening inside of them. You're hearing them, you're partially reading it through their body language and their facial expression. And as you start to put that into words like you did just now, they are going to start to feel heard and seen. And for many of our adults, they've never felt heard and they've never felt seen. That acute loneliness that you talk about, it's like a sense that they're invisible, that they don't exist. And that's where we come in, and our presence and our unconditional positive regard, just the old, okay, help me remember, Carl
Rogers.
Rogers, yes, thank you. Carl Rogers from way back in the 50s, I think, had the approach of unconditional positive regard. And you know what? There's nothing better than that. Like that old school Carl Rogers really had it right. And what sounds like you're doing is you are present, you're attuning, you're mentalizing, you're putting words to their feelings. I'm sure you're saying things like, here's what I'm sensing. Can you tell me if I have it right? This is what it seems like to me, but I need you to kind of help me understand a little better. And this is the feeling that I have. And as you attune and you show your genuine self, your compassion, your empathy, that sense of positive regard that you really care about the pain that they're going through, they are feeling seen and heard for the first time. And maybe for the first time, it can be for the first time. And that there is so much healing to that right there, just being heard and seen, that you're taking them on that journey. You are starting them down that path of healing right there.
Right, I get that. And that's a process that's slow and, takes time to develop, but they're only coming in for 45 minutes a week.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
they really, like, in a sense, desperately want to connect to other people and don't really know how.
yeah,
And is there a way that we can help them do that
yeah.
with their attachment?
Yeah. So one of the things I think about here that I like to do is, I bring in some of the EMDR components, and probably not everybody here is an EMDR therapist, but one of the things that we like to do in the preparation phase with EMDR therapy is what I call resourcing, resource development, which can be done with or without EMDR therapy. And what that's about is helping that client find and access and enhance the resources that they have within themselves to accomplish these little steps, these tasks that they would like to accomplish. And so if they want to accomplish the task of connecting to others and starting to actually, maybe reach out, actually approach people or open up a little bit and share of themselves, I like to ask them. First, we want to identify that would be a goal, that would be something that they would want to do. And then I will talk with them about, what qualities or resources do you feel like you need? What do you need to find within yourself and to make stronger that would help you to be able to take that risk of reaching out or opening up a little bit of yourself with somebody else. And so we'll start talking about those resources. Maybe it's some courage. Maybe it's the resource of just being vulnerable, or being assertive, being brave. And so we will start to talk about maybe who in their life made them feel a little bit of bravery or gave them a little bit of positive regard. And then we will work on maybe some imagery of bringing that person up in their minds, bringing them into their mind's eye, and joining with that individual, thinking about what that person would be telling them, what the person would be saying to them. And then we might do some imagery, future rehearsal, moving into that difficult situation, bringing that resource with them and imagining how they would like to do that. Or I'll role play it with them. We'll play it out, and I'll be the coworker that they want to talk to, and they'll practice bringing up their resource person, holding that resource person in their mind's eye, and approaching me and talking to me and sharing some little bit of themselves with me. So I like to do very practical things with people to actually rehearse and make it real, just very practical. And people really do appreciate that, because they're oftentimes petrified, afraid of rejection, or just it's new behavior that they've never done before.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's take another question from Shelley. Shelley, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So I've worked with foster children for many years in the foster care program, and practically just about everything anyone described, I've seen that, some situation. And I do find a lot of the kids, they haven't been beaten up silly by their parents. It's usually neglect, possibly because of mental illness, but the love is there. So I was wondering, like, what your thoughts about that. Like, even if there, issues with attachment, the parent themselves have their limitations. But if there is genuine caring, where that can come, to keep, is that the resilience? And of course, of course, we all know resilience is the wild card, and you see so many different situations. I'll add a couple other things in that also I wonder about. The teasing out between like poor attachment or whatever, you know, from all the categories, compared to like then, like if there's in the, we have kids who end up being adopted, but they've been with their foster parents literally from birth. And yet later on, you know, maybe more in starting in adolescence, end of, we see, you know, I feel it's the primal injury of the loss of, you know, of their birth parent. And my last thing to tie in how is about then at each developmental stage, what might need to be done when you become an adolescent, when you're, let's say, in a relationship, when you have your own child. And I'm assuming that any work you've done previously can help, further work. So just a lot of ideas, and I'm curious your reactions or what you would want to, say about any of that.
Yeah. What you started with there about what if the love is there, even if maybe they don't have the capacity to attune, they don't have that ability to mentalize, they really don't have good just skills. But honestly, if the love is there, that is half the battle. That's half of it. You can work with them. Like any family that has the love can learn how to attune. They can develop the mentalization. They can learn new skills. They can learn to connect. That's it. I'm a big believer in love, and that love can really do, even though I said when my daughter came to me, I was like, I thought love would just fix it. I needed skills too, but the love was there. And since I had the love, I was able to learn the skills over time. Not right away. I didn't know what I didn't know at first, but eventually I was able to gain the skills. And the children that have, you talked about the children that's maybe they start out and things are good, but then something falls apart, somebody dies, and that can be, very wounding, and grief is so overwhelming. That loss can be so overwhelming. But I still believe that if they had that love, if they experienced it at any point early in their life, that is going to continue to bear fruit. They're going to be able to form new connections and love again. Like once I've learned to love, I can love again. I think that capacity to love will overcome all kinds of odds. Once I have that capacity, or I've been loved, I know that I am lovable. I'm capable of taking in the love, so I can be loved again. I really believe that. Yes, they may be suffering. The grief may be enormous, but if I've had that love, I'm going to be able to utilize that. We're going to be able to get that person to get there again and have that again with somebody. And then the last thing you talked about was the parents who, they come out of this. I might have missed something too. You'll have to correct me what I might have missed, but the parents who come out of a really tough past and they now are having children and they don't know what they don't know. They're lost and they don't even know they're lost because they're parenting their child the same way they were parented. What can be tough when we see them in therapy is oftentimes because they were not well loved or well attuned to, they have a sense of inadequacy or insignificance. I'm not good enough. And it's hard. What's challenging is it's hard to reach them because of the defensiveness. You know, they're very well defended. They're very afraid of being judged. And now they're maybe bringing their child into therapy, and they're scared to death that the therapist is going to tell them that they're not good enough. And so for the therapist, the challenge is, how do I help this parent who is so scared of being judged that, you know, they're all closed up and guarded, and they're kind of on edge. And that's where I think we have to bring in our most non-judgmental, just accepting, very present, very open self to connect with that parent and to take the time to really connect before we kind of move into problem-solving mode or therapist mode. I need to, you know, intervene and fix this. Because if we don't have the relationship, if we don't have a little bit of therapeutic trust built, we're not going to have any kind of an impact. They're going to shut us out. So we can definitely help those parents, but we really have to pay attention to the therapeutic relationship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Every sentence could be a whole hour. But
Every sentence could be a whole hour. It's
because
true.
every kid, you know, everything could be, so it is complex.
So true, Shelley.
Let's take a question from Shimon. Thank you, Shelley. Go ahead, Shimon.
Thank you very much. And thanks for coming here, Deborah. And I like this discussion, but I'm going to repeat something Ruchama asked before. She spoke about adults, but she wasn't pointing out that much. A lot of times, you know, you bump into adults that suffer from a lot of things, anxiety, and they know all the words already, because sometimes they're already coming after being in therapy, and they know even about vulnerable, they know everything, but it's just something they heard about. They have no experience whatsoever, because they never got any, you know, the attachment, but they have no interest in their parents. Like a guy can say, I never visit my parents, I have no interest. And why don't you try? Because I remember when I was young and I was an adolescent, and everyone was calling home from camp, and I couldn't understand why they're calling. What's so good about calling? So good about talking to their parents? And now he's been already suffering from anxiety, panic attacks, and whatever. Everyone is different. Some people are trauma, some people are different. So how do you do now? What do you do now? That it's not like you can build a relationship. They have no interest whatsoever. So if I don't see them, I'm more happy. If I see my father, I shake my head a little, maybe. He's not angry, but he doesn't have it. He knows he's missing it. He knows all the words. And now you have to really build it from, I don't know, from scratch. So what are you doing? Where do you start?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sometimes it is definitely not an option to involve parents or with an adult to engage them in any kind of trying to repair things with the parents or somehow make a relationship. So where we have to start, I think, is, well, two things I'm thinking about. One is, again, the therapeutic relationship becomes even more paramount because they're not seen by the parent. They're not going to be ever seen or really truly understood by their parent. So the experience with us becomes their first experience of truly being seen and heard, and somebody who's really interested in what is going on the inside. Secondly, the other thing that I think about is when I work with adults who carry,
Now comes in the question, just a minute, that
Yeah.
Rahama asked before, that he's coming once a week, and a lot of times he's begging to be seen twice a week probably because of what you just mentioned. But it's only twice a week for 45 minutes. How's this going to build up this person that suffers from so many things? And he's crying about his not knowing how to relate to people, and even with his wife. And he's been already a father of a few kids.
yeah, he's already a father and he's not able to connect with his children.
He's trying to
Yeah.
avoid everyone, including, he's avoiding, basically his whole life is avoiding not being in public and whatever kind of stuff.
So the second important piece that I would want to do with this man would be to guide him in creating a relationship with the child part within himself. So one of the things that I like to do is talk to people about the little child part of you that you carry on the inside. I tell people, you know, I normalize this. I try to
This is
really,
not the MDR, is it? It's rather EFT, no?
it's
Or IFS?
right, similar to IFS, only honestly, I've been using this type of approach since before the IFS people, going back to Eric Burns, way back, who in the 70s wrote about the parent, adult, and child. I keep it really simple. And I talk to people about, you know, we all carry inside of us thoughts and feelings from when we were little, still just kind of stuck inside. And when we didn't get our needs met when we were little, oftentimes I say there's this younger part inside that is still yearning to get those needs met, and maybe looking to life out here in my adult world to get those childhood unmet needs met. And it doesn't work out well that way. So what I say to people is, I want to help you kind of shore up your adult self so that you and I can help you, and we'll walk through this together so that we can help you meet the unmet needs of that child part inside of you. So I like to do a lot of work with people, like imagery kinds of work, where or dialoguing internally, talking with that younger part of self to say, you know, you actually, and oftentimes we do a little imagery with creating some kind of a safe place inside where we can image that child part of self and actually give that child part of self maybe some caregiver, ideal caregiver figures, some imagined caregiver figures, and take that adult self there and dialogue with that child part on the inside and give that child part of self affirmations that that child part is worthwhile and is lovable and doesn't need to be concerned about grown-up life, but just deserves to just be a kid on the inside and relax and enjoy the affection and protection of, you know, the internal sort of imagined caregiver figures through just some gentle little imagery. And it sounds, maybe it sounds a little, I don't know, maybe it sounds a little, what I want to say, like woo-woo or something, but people take to it. They love it. They love doing this kind of imagery of seeing that child part of themselves nurtured by some kind of caregiver figures, maybe spiritual figures, just in a beautiful internal place. And I guide them in this, so they don't have to do it alone. They do it with some guidance. It's a very healing sort of imagery. And then I say, when you can heal and help that internal younger part of self, then that grown-up self is able to interact with others in your life from your grown-up brain, from that front brain, that
I'm
adult
wondering
brain.
if this is like some kind of I don't know, I would call it the curriculum, like guidance in these things, because it's a very tough.
Yeah, actually the book that I just wrote with my colleague Ann Potter is really is about this work, and has scripts that people can read and follow to do this imagery work. So that's one of the reasons we wrote the book, to try to make it simple for people to do.
There are
Is
books
this
on
what Aaron mentioned before?
Yeah, this one is the one for adult work, and it does say EMDR and attachment focused trauma therapy for adults, but the imagery and the scripts can be done without the bilateral stimulation as well. So it's we try to write it in a way that is scripted and very easy for people to just read and follow and do the imagery with folks. Because I'm just a huge believer that when we have attachment wounds with our parents out here, with our external parents that we grew up with, then what happens is internally that child part of self needs healing through that adult brain, through our adult selves, that we can provide that internally, and that this frees us up so that we can have adult relationships, adult to adult, instead of feeling like we're always trying to get those childhood needs met through the adults in our lives. That never works out well. The relationships end up falling apart because we're looking to our grown-up relationships to get needs met that were supposed to have been met when we were little.
Deb,
We can help. We can do that for that younger part of self.
earlier you mentioned that with your daughter, you had the love, but you needed to learn the skills. When you talk about learning the skills, what do you refer to? Because love can be the skill.
Love is a skill. That's true. Love is a skill, but how do we provide it? One of the things that I had to learn with my daughter was that when you're raising a child that has these attachment wounds, you cannot expect like this reciprocal thing that happens. When you raise a child from birth, you have immediately, the child is receiving, they're able to receive it. And when we give love and it's received, it feels good, right? It really feels great. And we feel like, yay, I'm a great mom. That's how I felt with my son. Like he was born to me and I was like, I can do this. It's so easy. I feel like a great mom. When my daughter came along, she couldn't take in my love. She pushed it away. She pushed me away. She was only 2.5, but she was already pushing away, not taking it in, not being receptive. And I had to learn that it was important for me to know that inside of her, she was yearning for that love. You know, the defenses were not because she didn't want the love. The defenses were because
the risk
being hurt.
presumably is that you watch the child not accepting the love, not receiving the love, and pushing back against the love, resisting, and then you're going to start to throw up your hands, become frustrated, and the reciprocity works counterintuitively, where you start showing frustration.
That's right. That's right.
You had to,
That's right.
you had to
Or
learn
she
to-
doesn't want me to, pick her up. Okay, then I won't pick her up, I guess. Or, oh,
So what
she doesn't
happens?
want
So-
me to
so
give her
what
a
breaks-
hug. Okay.
What transcends that that resistance? Is it just
So,
an amount of patience, or is it something else?
yeah, and you can't force it either, right? You can't like grab the child. I'm going to hug you no matter what. But what you can do is stay very present, stay very calm, and attune to what you know is underneath that, which is a very vulnerable, hurt child who actually desperately wants the love. And so you don't force it, but you also don't allow the child to push you away. You stay as close as you can stay comfortably without causing too much upset in the child, and you continue to approach, you continue the approach. You continue to talk, you continue to affirm, you continue to give affirmations and verbal affection, like, you are just the most wonderful kid. I'm so lucky to have you. Even if the child is keeping you at arm's length. I am so grateful that you're part of our family. You have such a good heart. So even if the child, this was her, when she first came to us, she would stand like this. She would cross her arms and she would look away. And I learned over time that what I needed to do was not just, okay, she wants me to leave her alone, I'll just leave her alone. I learned that what I needed to do was stay present and say, you are the most wonderful kid, and I am just so lucky to have you. And not to take it personally, but to just continue to be there and remember that underneath that suit of armor was a kid who just was scared and hurt and vulnerable. So it's it requires like some super attuned parenting that we may not have naturally, but we have to acquire it
Yeah.
and learn it.
This
not easy.
presumably is a lot of what we as therapists have to really do. We have to allow the process to unfold, take a step back, and acknowledge that there's something deeper and more that's happening here that's causing this disconnect or this distance.
Yeah.
And just roll with it and wait it out and continue that unconditional positive regard. But I can imagine as a parent, really wanting to push past that already and find that reciprocity as soon as we can.
Right. There's
Break
this,
through it.
there's this impatience, a natural impatience of,
We often explain it to parents just so, because they shouldn't take it personally. The child is just trying to quit before they're going to be fired. They don't, and that's, so it's not about you, it's just about their past experience. They may feel not worthy, and everything, all those affirmations is to give that message, you are worthy. You're not going to be fired, therefore you don't have to quit.
I love that. They want to quit before they're fired. That's a great way to explain it. I love that. Thank you, Shelley, for that.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
Well, the time flies when we're having fun. It's at 20 after 10s here in our neck of the woods. So I think we're gonna.
Time did fly quickly. I did not know it was this late. So thank you for giving me this time, and I love the questions. It was such a good conversation. I really had fun.
Well,
Thank
we
you, Moshi.
really appreciate you, your participation. And like I like to say with people on the attachment spectrum, on the relational spectrum, that I think more than the expertise that you share is the attachment itself. So watching you in action and observing how you accept the people and the audience is really perhaps a greater learning experience than sharing of the didactic information. So we really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, good night, everybody, and hope to see you next week.